Hey guys, it's Robin, RsIslandCrafts, and welcome to my craft room. I've got one more quick little random project for you guys before we finish out the month of May. I saw something similar to this on Instagram. That's where I like to look at a lot of the different pictures on Instagram. It doesn't matter if it's crafting or flowers and gardening. It's fun to scroll through and see what everyone's been working on. I happened to come across someone that was doing swaps or something with these little cards. I thought, well, that looks like fun. So I thought I'd show you today how I went about making these. I didn't see like a tutorial or anything online because I didn't look for one. It's really pretty self-explanatory for the way I wanted to make them and for me. So I've been working on these. These are going to be part of the rewards packet for my patrons. And I thought they'd be fun to have just a little word on it, a little create. You can handwrite something on here. I did send some of these out as thank you cards, and I just hand wrote thank you on it. And what I was thinking is you can just have a nice little card like this, and if you want to put it up in your craft room for a little bit of color and decoration in there. I just used a red to practice on because I wanted to see how I just bought the stamps this morning, so I wanted to see how they worked. But the ones that I'm sending out to my patrons, I used this light blue cardstock. That way I thought it wouldn't be stark white, and yet it would still allow the colors to pop from the fabrics, and you could still write a little note on the back or in here if you wanted to. And just by using a regular pen, it would still pop against this. But right now, Michaels is having a sale on their cardstock. These are packs of 50. They're normally $6. I got them for $3.33. So I picked up a pack of 50 whites. And then I picked up this Seaside. I thought these were a nice pale color that would look good with a variety of scraps. So I'm going to use these for that. And these are also good to use for my postcards. So when I'm making the fabric postcards, I like to put cardstock on the back of them. So this will work really well for that. Now, to determine the size of them, I happen to have these envelopes that I'm using to mail out my patron stuff. These are 4 1/8 inches by 9 1/2 inches. Envelopes come in all different sizes. For here in the U.S., you can go to the United States Postal's website and you can find out what a standard envelope size is that will allow you to still put just one stamp on it. So not only does it go by size, it goes by thickness. It needs to be less than 1/4 inch thick. And here in the U.S., it needs to weigh less than 1 ounce. Now, when you're mailing overseas, there's still 1 ounce for most countries, but for some reason, Canada and Mexico, you can use one single stamp and have it go up to 2 ounces. So it's one of those things where if you're going to be mailing out a bunch of something, I tend to just go to the post office, show them what I have, they weigh it, and they tell me what it's going to be, and then that way I can just put stamps on it from home. But I wanted to make sure that these cards would fit into these envelopes. So I decided for mine that for this set that I'm making, I just made them 4 inches. They're 4-inch squares, 4 by 4. But as I was cutting up the cardstock, I ended up with these little bits left over, and these ended up measuring 3 inches tall by 4 inches wide. So I thought, well, these are nice too. Maybe I'll just put a little thinner piece of fabric around it, or I'll just put one piece of fabric on the front and then you can write a note on the back. I thought it'd be fun little note cards to come from a quilter's craft room. And for those of us that like to save all of our scraps and when we find fun little fabrics, a lot of times I'm just going to toss little bits of fabric like this. These are only 1 1/2 inches wide. But there's some that I really kind of like, and they have some little fun colors on it that I thought, well, I'll just save those for here, and then it would be fun to cut up for our little note cards. One of my friends sent me this little package of scraps to play with, and this is where I went ahead and I pulled different fabrics out of here to use. Well, I just wanted to show you real quick, if you're using different envelopes, just make sure that you measure them first. These do not fit in these smaller envelopes, but of course the smaller ones will. So it depends on what you need. What I was thinking is I was thinking about putting these in my shop to make some and have them in the shop for people to purchase as note cards, but I thought maybe I would go ahead and make some envelopes. But I had a lot of questions. Any of you card makers out there, how do you make your envelopes? I know they have stencils and templates and the little tools that fold it and all for you, but what type of paper do you use? This is a security envelope, of course, but can you just use printer paper to make an envelope, or is that too thin and too see-through? This doesn't feel very thick, and I know cardstock feels like it might be too thick for an envelope. So any card makers, please let me know down in the comments what type of paper you use if you're making handmade envelopes. This was one of those projects that I just kind of, now that my craft room is clean and I can have a little bit of creativity and my brain can kind of breathe a little because I have space to move around. Something that like I said, I saw a picture on Instagram and I thought, well, that sounds like fun. Let me play with that. And I'll show you how I decided to play with mine. Once again, it's one of those types of projects you can go ahead and take the idea and just go with it and create things any way you want. Maybe you want to make actual cards where you fold a cardstock, you know, it opens like a regular greeting card. You can do that. I will be using some of these for fabric postcards because I like the idea of having this. You know, kind of like the ticker tape ones where you just sew a whole bunch of different fabrics down. I thought that was kind of fun. So I'm sure I'm going to run with this and do many different things with it. So I went through my bag of scraps and I just cut up a whole bunch of 1.5-inch strips. It didn't matter how long they were or how short they were. Just fabrics that I thought were in a variety of colors that would scrappily, randomly work together. And then I just cut them, like I said, into 1.5-inch strips. And then after I had a handful of these, I've already made several cards. I've probably made 40 of them already. So I've gone through a lot of my scraps. Then I just take them over to the lid for right now. This is my setup. And I would just take my fabrics. I was trying to separate them a little bit by color when I first started, and that's what you can do if you want to make sure you don't have, like, if you want a whole green card or you want to make sure you don't have too much green. I just decided, well, this looks like a good length. Let me just go ahead and cut them like this. And then if I had just a little bit of a bigger piece, I would still just go ahead and leave that and just put it into my pile. Sometimes if I had longer strips, I would just go ahead and fold it in half. And then that way I could just go ahead and take it and I would just snip it. Now these snips are about 1 inch long. It's totally random. I didn't want it to be anything exact. And then when I got to the fold, I just stuck my scissors into the fold and snipped that. And then I just let it pile up here on my lid. Now in the future, I think I'm going to go pop up to the Dollar Tree, and they have all these little types of containers like this for if you want to put like nails or screws in it, or if you want to put beads. So I thought I'd pick up a couple of something, whatever they happen to have at the time. It seems to vary on whatever they have in stock and what you can find. So I thought I'd pick up some of these so that I can go ahead and snip a bunch of fabrics, and then I can sort them by color or general color family, because a lot of these are multicolored. Or I could just put a whole bunch of snippets and then I could just pick through them as I want to use them. This container is just way too deep, but it just happened to be one that I had that was empty. I'll probably be switching over. This is an old cold meat container from Walmart. I like to wash these out and save them. They're great for putting little bits of stuff like this in, but I really want to have in the future something with the separate compartments so that I could separate them and they won't all get mixed up like this. So I can separate certain colors if I want and then just have a hodgepodge of colors. So we've grabbed our random scraps. We've cut them into 1.5-inch strips. I did use my rotary color for this. A lot of these strips are in random shapes, but some of them are like 2.5-inch strips. Maybe they were cut from a jelly roll or they were ready for binding. Then I would just go ahead and lay my ruler down on them and cut them into the 1.5-inch width that I wanted. And other ones were just little pieces that I could just cut up easily. And as I said, I just let them pile up in this bucket, and this is just where I saved them. And that way I can kind of do this and pick through and grab whatever colors I want. I used my little lid as my palette. When I was working on my cards, I just went ahead and I laid them all out on my table, however many I wanted or however many fit on my cutting board. These, of course, were all blank at the time. So I might have something set up like this. I'd have them all lined up nice and neat and pretty and all in a grid work, or you can just work on one at a time. But I found that I was kind of like doing when you deal out cards like poker players. I was laying out my fabrics like this so that I can go ahead and place a whole bunch at once. So let's just work on 4 for right now. I'd come over to my palette and I'd go ahead and just grab one chunk of the fabrics of all the same fabric that I cut up that's sitting in a pile. Now if I had some long pieces like this, I might set that aside, and it didn't matter to me if they were short or if they were long, because I'm going to use a variety of sizes. As you can see, none of these were cut precisely. They're not all the same size. They just happen to all be 1.5 inches wide. So I would just go ahead and I would lay down 2 of these for each card, and I might put them in opposite corners, or I might just go ahead and put them somewhere near each other. I don't have to worry. It doesn't bother me if things are perfect and exact and all the same size, or if there's 2 of the same fabric in one spot or one area. It doesn't bother my eye or my brain if I would have put one here. And even though this is the same fabric, it's a different color, it wouldn't bother me to go ahead and lay one next to it. Then I would just go ahead and grab the next colors and I would just keep laying them down. I kind of liked having the 2 of each fabric on there. And if I didn't have enough of the fabrics to do all the cards, that didn't bother me. I'd just go ahead and I'd put more into my hand. And then I would just go ahead and lay those out too. Sometimes I would put the corners so that they go up and down this way, and sometimes if they go that way, until I put the actual stamps on them. If I stamp a word in there, like create, dream, scraps, beauty, whatever, any type of words that you want to put in there, I didn't worry about which direction, as long as they just went in that square. And as I'm doing it, I might decide to switch some things up. Well, I did notice that some of these have an angle on it, and I really didn't want that to be that scrappy of, you know. I want it to be, it doesn't have to be a perfect straight 90-degree or whatever angle. I just wanted to make sure I had a straightish edge on there, and I didn't have any weird triangle-y pieces. So I just try to make sure that if it has a right side and a wrong side, that I made sure that it only had, you know, I put them all right side up. If it's something random like a batik that can go either way, then I didn't worry about it. So I'm going to go ahead and keep piecing this, and then we'll come back when I have them all set up. Now, when working on these smaller mini cards, I didn't want to smush my fabric in too much. I wanted to make sure I still left a little bit of space in between all the pieces of fabric. Now, they don't have to be in the exact spot because we're going to go ahead and glue these down. But as you see, I'm missing a piece here and there. So if I have a piece that's going to fit, I can go ahead and just put it in that spot. But if I need a smaller piece, I can see I got a lot of orange and yellows. Maybe I want to pop a green in there. I have this fun little stripe, and if I lay this in there, that one's just a little bit too big for the space I want. So I can just go ahead and trim this bit, this little scrap down. It's just a scrap. Chances are people are going to throw these away anyways. So I want to see if whichever way I want to put my stripes, I can go ahead and add that in there. And there's the basic layout. Now, I did have to turn off, I have an overhead fan in my room and a tabletop fan. I did have to turn off my tabletop fan because it was blowing my pieces all over. I had to close the door to keep the cats out because Miss Whiskers, no matter how many times I told her, please, no, 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 she jumped on the table and I had fabric flying everywhere. And as I said, I was doing 21 of them at one point, so she kind of laid on it and she had fabric stuck to her fur. It was funny and aggravating all at the same time. Now you may have noticed by now that the Dollar Tree is a favorite little stop of mine. I found a 3-pack of these Elmer's washable school glue. It's a pen. it has that little bit of a tip on it, so it doesn't, a lot of times when you're using the big bottles, sometimes more will come out than you want. So I thought I'd go ahead and try these little pens out, and they work pretty good for this project. But you can go ahead and you can try to use a glue stick, but I was concerned that the top of the glue stick is so big and the fabric is so little. I didn't want to have extra glue stuck anywhere else, and I didn't want to have to worry about sewing through it. Even though they say it's easy to sew through a glue stick, I just thought, well, I already had these little pens, let me give these a try. So my next step is I just took the little pieces of fabric off. I put a small dab of glue. I just need enough to hold the fabric on until I get to the sewing machine. I try to keep it to the center because when I stitch these down, I'm going to stitch down on both edges of the fabric. And I want a little bit of the cardstock popping through on the side. I'm trying to lay them down straight-ish. I don't mind if the fabric gets a little bit wonky, but I don't want it to be obviously crooked. And then I just work my way around, adding a little dab of glue. Yes, this is a little bit tedious, but put on a little Netflix or, watch some of my old YouTube videos. And I'll keep you company while you're just sitting here and popping all these down. I was binging on a TV show, Lie to Me, on Hulu. So I've been hooked onto that show. I've got 2 pieces of fabric here. You just want to watch for that because you really don't need to have 2. One's enough. So you're just going to keep going around in that fashion and gluing all of them down. And then I just stuck the card and left it sit over to the side. As it dried, I didn't worry about hitting it with the iron and pressing it or anything. It's such a little small dab of this glue that's just going to hold that card, the fabric onto the card, so that we can move it to the sewing machine and stitch it down. So let me go ahead and destroy my cards here and move them out of the way. So I went ahead and I used a light blue thread because it was a blue cardstock to stitch these down. My sewing machine, when I turn it on, the stitch length is a 2.4. I knocked it down one little click, which put it to a 2.2, just to make sure that as it's going through this cardstock, I'm not getting any weird bumps and that the stitching is going to lay down nice. I just started in one spot. I was doing this chain piecing. Let me see if I can see where... You see how I just chain pieced right off the edge? I would just put it in the machine, and I went ahead and I just stitched right along the edge. My stitching is not straight, as you can see, because my fabric is not lined up perfectly, and not all of it is the same exact width, so it depends on how I flip the fabric around. And I just stitched all the way around, just a regular old standard running stitch, sewing machine stitch that you do. And then I would let it sit in my machine, and I would take the next card, and I would start stitching on this. And once I was able to get around the corner, I would go ahead and just take my scissors and disconnect this one, because as you're spinning it around, I didn't want to have this card following it all around in the machine. So I just kept feeding them through until I stitched around all the way around the first outside of the pieces. Then I went back to the machine and I just picked a spot somewhere about here, and then I just started, I did a little back stitch to make sure that it's going to stay, and then I stitched around the inside. So once again, I left this in my machine and I was chain piecing it, so when I got back around, I did a little back stitch again here to make sure it stays secure. And then I lifted up my foot and lifted up my needle and I just slid it out of the way, and then I went ahead and I put the next one in. And once again, I just stitched all the way around. When I got to the first end, I snipped off the previous one so that I was only dealing with the one at a time. Now I just have to go through and snip all these threads. And there I have a nice little note card. You can put a little design in here. You can sketch something if you're artistic. You can put another piece of scrap fabric in there if you have maybe a little puppy dog or some seashells or whatever. Or you can just do like I'm doing. And you can just go ahead and put a little stamp on there and stamp the words. Now for this, once again, when I went up to Michael's this morning and I picked up the cardstock, the reason I went is I wanted to get a little alphabet. So I found these little tiny alphabet letters. I got the lowercase ones because I just liked the way they look on the card. Once again, this is a different brand of cold meat. These little containers are perfect for reusing them and storing little things like this. I picked up a basic ink dye. I had to actually stop and ask someone if these were pre-inked, because the last time I'd used a stamp, when you can do like stamp something paid, or you can put an address or something on it, you had to actually buy ink and fill the stamp pad yourself. But this one already comes pre-inked. This was like $3. The little alphabets were like $9. But once again, use your coupons and you can get things for cheaper at Michael's and Joann's. 40%, 50% off. A lot of times they'll have 20% off whatever you purchase. Now I'm sure I can just look this up online, but I did have another question for you card makers and stampers. With this type of ink and these little stamps, what I did after I used my little Create, I had a damp paper towel and I just kind of stamped it on the damp part and then a little bit on the dry to clean the ink off. Is that appropriate? Did I do it right? So if anyone knows the answer to that, please go ahead and leave it down in the comments. So I just picked out my little stamps. I just gave it a little touch and then I put it on here. And that's it. That's all it took to go ahead and get those words stamped on there. I think it looks really nice. I could be crazy and I could be the only one that's interested in this at all, but I just thought that these were just so fun, and I spent several hours just making dozens of them. So as I said, in my mind, I thought it'd be nice to just stamp a little something here. And if you're sending a little gift to some friends, some friend mail, and you're already doing a card, or you're sending them some fat quarters, or you've made them a hat or a little quilt or whatever, I thought it would be nice just to have the little card here that had whatever, dream, breathe, create, and then something you could just write a little quick note here. Now, of course, this is hard for me to stay within this little space. So this would require me to be like a postcard. I'd only be able to write a very short note, so I'd have to make sure I think through what I want to say. You know, thank you for being a friend. Thank you for helping me out. A quick little thank you note to say, thank you for thinking of me. I appreciate you. And then you could just pop it in the mail. And I thought it'd be fun. And then your friend can either keep it, you know, use a thumbtack and put it up on the board, put it in a magnet and put it on the refrigerator, or just like any other type of note. If it's a thank you note, you could always just toss it if that's the type of person you are. But I thought these are fun, and it's a nice fun little way to use up those little bits of scraps. So let me know down in the comments, am I crazy, or did this seem like kind of cool, something fun to do? This would be great for kids, like your grandkids, or in a kindergarten or first grade class. They can actually sit there and pick out the fabric and put it all around for you. They can help you glue it down, and then you could take it to the sewing machine if they're not quite ready to sew. So that's it for me this week. I hope you guys are having an amazing day. I hope you're playing with your fabric and having a little bit of fun working with your scraps. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.